Welcome, everybody. I think this is our last meeting of 2022. Today, we are going to be going over the past and I hope having a lively discussion about the future. As always, I need to remind you that the meeting is recorded and live streamed. You have the usual list of people, suspects, Tom, myself. Tom is in the UK today. Lorenzo, also in the UK, Jim and Joel. And we thank them, everybody, for the work. We have our usual communication channels. I guess our IMAG wiki page isn't working today, so I can't point to that. We do have a LinkedIn site. We have a Facebook page and so on. We'll come back to those a little bit later. Please help us use them. And we have that Twitter handle, MSMViral, which I think is a nice name we can use. We will have a steering committee meeting tomorrow at 11. The invites should have been sent out. Please do come. The goal of that meeting will be to try to continue our discussion of the items that we raised today and think about paths forward. Are there any other announcements before we get started formally for today? I think, again, I could announce for TJ. TJ is looking to recruit a postdoc or two. So if you have somebody finishing up or know somebody looking for a position for University of Florida in modeling, please send them TJ's way. So we're going to try going down to once every 2 weeks in 2023. I think people are tired of online meetings, so maybe we'll do better with 2023. We have meetings scheduled for the 19th of January, the 2nd of February. Please do help us fill out the meeting roster. Again, as always, suggest yourself, suggest your students, suggest your postdocs, suggest the people that you would like to hear from so that we can keep the seminars going. We have some links about the wiki page, survey, and so on, which you're welcome to use. Please ask Jim Sluka if you want access to any of those materials. So today we're going to come back to the working group, its history and future. And as I say, I hope we'll have a lively discussion about that. If we come back to the motivation of the working group, it got started relatively quickly after the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Discussion started the summer of 2020, basically motivated by the importance of epidemiological modeling, often very simple epidemiological modeling in policy. The fact that there were epidemiological models available meant that those could be rapidly redeployed in the context of COVID, but there seemed to be much less available for in-host modeling of all kinds. And that meant that those kind of models were less available. They were available, for example, for PBPK modeling for drug dosing, but they were generally less available in the context of trying to understand the consequences of viral infection and improve therapies. And so our goal here was to try to balance all of the modeling work that was being done for epidemiology with a balanced focus on in-host models of all kinds. And Erica from Pittsburgh and I started this discussion again, June 2020. Reinhardt then took over and we set up the working group in the fall of 2020, started meeting, and the goal was to bring together people from multiple communities, not just modelers, but immunologists, virologists, industry representatives, clinicians, to try to understand how to develop and use multi-scale modeling of immune response in the context of viral pandemics. And I think that it's probably been the most active of the IMAG MSM groups, certainly one of the most active of the IMAG MSM groups over the last 2 years. And we appreciate all the volunteer effort from everybody who's been involved. Early on, we realized that trying to build predictive models of viral infection was going to be very challenging, both in terms of the complexity of the models being built and the issues of how do you validate those kind of models, and that we'd need a lot of different expertise. It had to be transdisciplinary from the beginning. And there was a focus, which I think has to some extent been fulfilled, on the trying to develop parallel approaches, collaborative, large-scale approaches to doing this kind of development. That's something that's been discussed to some extent over the past 2 years. Although that kind of technology is something that can still be discussed further. There were a whole bunch of issues on the technical side that we identified that early on that we thought were interesting, and some of those have been discussed over the period. Reinhardt is very focused and organized as a leader, had a list of deliverables that we wanted to achieve, some of which you see here. Some of these have happened. As usual with these kinds of things, many of them haven't happened, but other things have. And so we could probably look at this list and compare this list of things that happened with things that didn't happen. Good intentions are always interesting, but they lead to interesting things. So we started out by asking people what areas should be talked about. And we came up with an unbelievably long laundry list of what were called subgroups. And as often happens with these things, a number of these subgroups met. Ones that are highlighted met at least a few times. But as a volunteer effort, life happens, people have other interests. And so as time went on, the subgroups thinned out, and we really were left with 2, and we'll come back to that in a minute. One of the things I think that was important, and we'll come back to this in the way forward, and this is a free quotation of something Gary Ann said a few weeks ago, is that I think one of the biggest impacts of the working group has been the recognition that we have to be part of digital twin conversation, and that this community has a very special perspective on digital twins that need to be present at the table if digital twins in the context of medicine, particularly immunology, are going to be developed in a maximally effective way. And that developing infrastructure for mechanistic medical digital twins, especially immune medical digital twins, is going to be an integral part of planning for preparedness for the next pandemic. Coming back to what we've done, you've seen this list of resources before. You see it every week. We have them. I don't think that they've been used as much, perhaps, as they could. We are not trained communicators, perhaps, and that's something that we could think about going forward. Can we actually build community through communication more effectively? We do have the IMAG wiki pages, at least when the system is working. Those have abstracts, links to the YouTube videos of all the seminars, about 130 of them so far, mostly the slide decks, publications by group members, especially group collaborations. And there is a preliminary list of runnable models. So there's been a little bit of an attempt to build not a formal repository, but at least a reference point of executable computer simulations that people could use to reference. And there are physicell models available, ContourCell models available, Jupyter Notebook models, NetLogo models, a number of them. That could be definitely expanded in the future. It takes a lot of work, but it's expanded. We've thought a bit about modeling methodologies and tools. Many people in this community develop tools. This is not meant to be exclusive, it's just two of them. The top shows one of Tom's tools in an application, in this case, in T-cell differentiation. Our CompuCell-based modeling framework is down below. Other people have developed a variety of frameworks. Reinhardt has presented, Paul Macklin has presented, and others have presented on their modeling frameworks about how you can develop tools to support diverse needs. And Reinhardt in particular has given a nice talk about how those kind of tools could be potentially interconnected in the future to build larger scale, more integrative models. We could have some logos here associated with that. CompuCell, Cell Collective, Morpheus has been presented. We had a great talk recently by Nova Discovery about their open Jinko platform for building and executing models, mainly in their case focusing on clinical trials, but it also allows in-host models. And something that they've worked on a lot, which is quite interesting, is building what we call conceptual models in their annotation. We had a nice talk also from the EPA, from Abstract Sifter, which is another tool for building conceptual models and annotating. We have that runnable models page. We only have 6 models there. We'd love to have additional ones. Please help us develop that. We have Sharif and the Biomodels repository who are willing to help us out with that as well. So we'd love to have your contributions there. Talk to Jim Sluka if you want to add things to that page for runnable models. So we've had successes in a variety of directions. I think the working group has contributed to do collaboration, certainly do projects at smaller scales. Plenty of publications, resources, which you've just seen, funding, which we'll come back to at the end, and I think really building new communities. We sent out a survey about what people felt, and there were some nice responses. The working group's been great for identifying new directions for model development, identifying areas that are underserved, and building a community. I'm preparing a joint grant application and published a couple of manuscripts. Collaborating has been very educational, and it's helped me build connections. And so I think in general, we're not a big community. The number of people who come every week is not huge, but there's a lot of enthusiasm for this. And there are a significant number of people who participate offline through the video archive as well.
Can I just add something?
Go ahead, please.
I just want to point out, if you could go back to one slide, just one that I'm in particular that I think we should be proud of. There has been at least one young scientist who, sorry, TJ, to call you out, but who through these collaborations and networking was able to just very recently secure a tenure track position. And so I think as being academics, I think that is something to be proud of.
Okay, good point. I think there've been, in terms of finding postdocs, graduate students, and collaborations, we've been very successful. In terms of publications, there are about 35 publications listed on the website from people who participate in the group that are relevant publications. I've tried to highlight ones that are fundamentally wouldn't have happened without the group. So these are collaborative publications, some of them scientific, some of them opinion pieces, some of them roadmaps. Starting with just because I'm giving the talk, the editorial that Reinhardt and Jim Sluka and I did in Science on immune digital twins, Reinhardt's roadmap for immune digital twins, Veronica's review on using modeling in advanced virology, Jonathan and others' paper on model integration and reproducibility, Williams' paper on compositional modeling of immune responses. These are all collaborations that wouldn't have happened without the working group. And so these are some of the quite high-profile papers, both research and reviews. And I think that that really is a success. There's been a lot of publication coming out of it. If we come to more technical papers, and I apologize for listing some that are from my own group, but they're a series that we've done that would not have happened otherwise. There are collaborations with many people in the room today, which I think are of importance and which we appreciate. There's Chantal's paper, which is another one with Chantal and Yi and other members of the group community on aerosol modeling that I think would not have happened without the working group. Anna Mirakis has been working on model integration in a very nice way. Gary has published with a variety of important reviews and opinion pieces that have, I think, affected the field a lot. And so I don't want to short anybody. Hannah down at the bottom here, epidemiological consequences of viral interference. And the Nova Discovery paper at the bottom right. So there are many papers that have been influenced and promoted by this working group. And I hope people are happy to free to speak up and include more. We listed about 35. These are all people's suggestions. So when people have suggested papers to put up, they're here. Again, I was highlighting ones that I thought would not have happened without the working group specifically, but all of these are papers related to the topic of in-host modeling that involve working group members. So I think that that represents tremendous success scientifically. There are more of those list. If anybody wants to speak up about any of them while they're there, you're free to do so. I don't mean to cut people off. The other thing that we have is, of course, the seminar archive. There are about 130 seminars available on YouTube. I do wish we had a better way of communicating those, but people do watch them, and I think that that is a huge resource going forward for trying to survey this field in a diverse way. So I'm now going to turn over, having reviewed the past, I'm now going to turn over the screen share and the meeting to Tom, who's going to talk about plans and hopes for the future.
You know, where do we go from here? So as this group has been focused on multi-scale modeling and viral pandemics, there have been discussions in terms of having impact even beyond viral pandemics, and a lot of interest centered around the sort of booming idea of digital twins. And so if we look at over the last several decades, the idea of digital twins or digital abstraction, computer abstraction of some physical objects has been implemented very well in many fields, primarily manufacturing. But over the last maybe 18 months, I would say, there has been a lot of shift to utilizing this concept of digital twins for in other areas, including biomedical research. And for example, in Europe, the European Union has recently committed 150 million euros to develop a digital twin of Earth. They call it Destin Earth, with the purpose of using that to study climate change. Other ecosystems have also been developed a lot in Europe. New technologies are coming out. So big tech companies, NVIDIA, Intel, and others are developing technologies to enable these complex models to be run. And also in the US, very recently, the FDA has approved FDA Modernization Act, for example, where they strive to augment and, if not in the future, replace clinical trials with computational models and simulations, among other technologies and tools that can help with developing safer treatments and maybe in a sort of cheaper way. And so, next slide, please. So out of this working group, a lot of our focus has expanded to the immune system and the concept of digital twins. And James already mentioned this paper, but this paper by Jim James and Reinhard of how can we start imagining building an immune digital twin, a computational model that would be multi-scale, that would take into consideration a lot of different types of biological and medical data that could be then used could enable precision medicine and help with diagnosis, prognosis, therapy optimization, as well as sort of monitoring one's health trajectory, if you will. Next slide, please. So we have been, so the group has been working with a lot of leaders in the area of immune digital twins. We're hoping to identify different payoffs and more, in a concrete way. We're working towards developing roadmaps on how the immune digital twin or immune digital twins can be developed. We believe that there is a lot of potential in developing immune digital twins that can, like I said before, enable precision medicine, but also help perhaps towards decreasing the cost and time it takes to develop new technologies, new medicine. Sorry. Next slide, please. So we were having discussion on this, and one of the some of the feedback we get as we talk about this concept, it's people say, well, this is too hard, you shouldn't do it. But we really believe that just because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So we're taking the opposite approach. We are going to pursue it. We are pursuing it, and we have to kind of help us organize ourselves and sort of capture our next phase of our vision. We are in the process of setting up a new global alliance for immune prediction and intervention. That would be a nonprofit organization that would facilitate the development and then the use of immune digital twins or predictive immune models to improve our understanding of the immune system and the diseases, the mechanism of disease, and excuse me, and enable precision medicine through these technologies. There will be a lot of it's not just about the technology, the models. There will be a lot of challenges related to regulatory and societal issues that I believe we will also be positioned well to tackle through the community. We want to become a resource to academia, industry, as well as governments in better understanding and advancing our understanding of the immune system, and also with emerging pandemics, whether existing or those that will be coming, and so forth. So this is one way that we're sort of moving forward, and another one, and already underway, is a new subgroup of the working group that's specifically on immune digital twins, that meets every 2 weeks, and has been meeting for maybe a couple of months now. And so if anybody is interested in immune digital twins, please join us every Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern time. Next slide, please. So in addition to, so we're really working towards that. And we've been thinking about this problem of immune digital twins for a while. And as James mentioned, some of the successes that our working group has had include also funded grant proposals, and in particular 5 of them. And many of these proposals are really sort of signaling and underlying the broader focus that the working group is interested in terms of immune digital twins. And so over the next few slides, I'll ask, we'll go kind of in more detail about these, just not more detail, but a little bit more than what I just said and what you're seeing on these slides, to give you a little bit of background. And so I would ask if Reinhard, would you mind summarizing briefly the forum on precision immunology and the workshop in France?
Yes, thank you, Tom. So this is it's an event that's sponsored by the biomathematics program at the U.S. Army Research Office. The idea is to bring together an international group of experts on this topic, immunologists, clinicians, modelers, to spend 2 days discussing the major challenges in building immune digital twins, scientific challenges, clinical challenges, immunological challenges, technological challenges, and the infrastructure that's needed to do it. So there will be no sort of formal presentations. There'll be no PowerPoint slides in sight anywhere. It really will be 2 days of discussions. We will we'll record it. The recording, both video and audio, will be available as soon as it's done, publicly available, and we will write a detailed report or white paper on it, or whatever you may call it, that can be used for a variety of other purposes. So that'll happen in February for 2 days. And then in May, there'll be, one could say, a follow-up. This is it's a 3-week workshop that's funded by the Institut Pascal in Paris. And so that's an institute that's set up for workshops of this sort. They have the infrastructure and funding to support 3-week workshops with roughly 60 visitors per week. So potentially one could bring 180 people there. And we're thinking of it as essentially a hands-on, I wouldn't call it a hackathon, but really a hands-on way of getting going on these things. So if you're interested, and or if you have other people in your lab that are interested, let us know. We've been kind of slow in putting out a program and a website to register, but we're almost there. So so if you're interested, let me know.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. We can go to the next slide.
So this was just a small internal seed grant that I thought I'd mention that came out of the working group. It's a collaboration with a group, our group and a group at Hopkins, trying to do initially sort of classical virtual tissue modeling, directed at developing validated digital twin models, building up in sort of the classic scientific way, starting with in vitro culture to organic typic culture to organoid culture, and then forward, but focusing on modeling individual instances of the experiments. So it's an experimental modeling collaboration that came out of the work.
William, are you around? Would you mind talking about your project?
I am, sure. Thank you. So this one might seem like the odd one out if you were to look at the list of grants where there's, it's all digital twin, epidemics, digital twin. But that's a bit deceptive. So this came out of it came out partly, at least, from some of the work with in this group with Veronica and Ruchira in particular, where we did some rule-based modeling of immune response and coupled that to an epidemic. That and some other things basically let us make the argument that rule-based modeling is useful, it's effective, it has some very nice properties, including compositionality, which I think we want if we're building big, big complex models. And so this is some funding for doing essentially two things: for doing some work on the technical infrastructure that we need in order to be able to do this, to expand what rule-based modeling can do a little bit, and to do a bunch of case studies. The case studies go sort of in two directions, right? They go, they're centered on epidemics, but they go in one direction towards the within-host dynamics, and in particular the immune modeling, which I think could lead to some very fruitful collaborations and joint work with the immune digital twins. And in the other direction, maybe a little bit less directly relevant, behavior and social dynamics, which of course also have a very strong influence on what happens with epidemics. Both very hard problems, and like the rest of you, I'm not afraid of hard problems. So yeah, and as well, there will be a series of very hands-on teaching style workshops, not the kind of workshops that are kind of miniature conferences, but actual workshops, which will run, I think we're going to run 3 of them, 1 a year for the next 3 years, where we'll try to get people together and actually teach and get people using this stuff, which I think would be great. And the last thing to mention, I think, is this is very fresh. In fact, it's been recommended for funding, but there's still formal paperwork and stuff that has to be done, although the program manager said to tell my colleagues, and I don't know if they intended that I tell my colleagues in a public forum, but there you are. And so sometime in the new year, we'll be hiring the first of 2 people to work on this, and just be on the lookout for people who are skilled in particularly functional programming and OCaml, ideally. And if you know of any such person looking for a job, please send them my way.
Thank you so much, William. I appreciate it. Okay, so the last grant. So this was a grant awarded by our university, University of Nebraska and Lincoln, which very recently initiated this Grand Challenges program, where they are investing $10 million per year for 4 years for big, crazy ideas. And so I tend to write crazy proposals. so we did have to submit one, and we were fortunate that we were one of the 3 projects that were funded, and in particular we were funded to develop a digital twin innovation hub that we hope will bring to fruition at least a draft of the infrastructure, including software, as well as integrated multi-scale models of about 20 different immune cell types. We are focused on in terms of, what we will attempt to do in terms of showing the utility of the technology and of the model. We're focused on using the multi-scale model to somehow better characterize the status of the human immune system. Right now, when we try to treat diseases, we're hoping that we want to get the immune system from one diseased state to something more healthy. But it turns out that we don't really understand what healthy immune system is. And so we're hoping that with the infrastructure, we'll be able to better characterize the sort of, in quotes, health status of the immune system. The third objective of this initiative is to develop new curricula for post-secondary immunology education. As with many life sciences courses, if we look at how we use these technologies as scientists to understand and study diseases and the mechanism of diseases and the mechanism of the immune system, and then we look at how we teach the students about these systems, it's very different. We teach them by lecturing to them and expect them to memorize the different pathways and different networks, yet we use these dynamical tools to study the dynamics of the immune system. And so we've been developing ways and methods to teach biology by having students build and simulate and break computational models of those biological systems. And so in this initiative, we will be doing exactly that for the immunology curriculum in college, for college education in particular. Next slide, please. Okay, so we, as our focus is expanding, so what do we need to do next? We've been fortunate through this community. The community has been extremely productive in generating new insights into viral pandemics, multi-scale modeling, immune system, and also obtaining a little bit of funding to really take us to the next phase, or enter at least the next phase. And so our primary goal is to really make the Global Alliance a practical reality, and through immune digital twins, really become that resource when it comes to the immune system and viral pandemics and also other immune-related pathologies. And so really this slide is to generate, maybe trigger our discussion for the next 20 minutes or so that we have. What else can we do as a community? How do we better organize ourselves? We want to work with federal agencies who hopefully share some of these goals to help define new funding that will really enable this as for the whole community, so that the community can move forward faster. Working with private agencies and state agencies, and also bridging industry and medicine clinicians that can also utilize this technology down the road. So I will stop talking now, but we're happy to take questions, and hopefully we can keep discussing. Thank you.
Please give us your thoughts. So is this a reasonable agenda? And if it is or not, where do we go from here? I can't play my usual role of asking questions because I can't ask myself questions. I suppose I could, but I think that would be inefficient.
Hi, James. I'll chime in.
Oh, Grace, please.
I don't know if people on this call are aware of a new National Academy of Science and Engineering Medicine study on the foundations of the digital twins. We actually all of the sponsors are actually IMAG representatives, and it just got started in August for 18 months, and I'll post the link in the chat. And they have ongoing webinars with experts to speak about digital twins, the gaps, the needs. And what our sponsors are interested in is actually for this study to create a roadmap on how we should approach creating robust, not bespoke digital twins. So not one-off digital twins, but digital twins that can be scalable across the different domains that are being covered. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to join. Everything on this website that you can see are the public sessions. So you're welcome to join and hear it out. And I think our very own George Karniadakis will be presenting soon. It might be even the December 12th meeting.
It is December 12th.
Yeah, so just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Grace. Very helpful.
So Grace, maybe I can ask you, this is Gary, so what is the opinion of the NIH regarding medical digital twins? I mean, is it the next big data? Is it the next big AI? Is this the next, catchword that we need to catch the surf on? What is the actual thinking about what these things are, and how important is the use of that phraseology in terms of, funding priorities?
Yeah, good question. And so the very first thing that everyone says actually at the end when we start talking about it in any of these meetings is everybody has their own definition of a digital twin. And so you may want to use the catchphrase, but then you should define your version of it so people really understand what you mean by it. But it is becoming a catchphrase. We did actually promote digital twins as a grand challenge in Bridge to AI, for example, if you've been following that, another activity that I've been shepherding. And to be honest with you, it didn't work out. We're not ready for it. And one of the reasons is actually we weren't sure if we had even the sensors, the measurement devices to collect the appropriate data for creating real-time perturbations of a digital twin computational model. So you may have to go back to basics, and I was going to and one other thing is I just created, and this was the test page that I was editing. Well, not test page anymore, but I created a little other interest group page on the wiki. So the wiki is working. I'm sorry, Jim, if it doesn't work for you, but I have a digital twins page on the wiki now. And so you're welcome to use it to post your digital twin. So I would say post your digital twin things on your viral pandemic working group page, and then relink it to the digital twins other interest group page. And I'll post it here. I mean, literally it's a brand new page where I really want people to take a look at the NASM study from time to time, mark your calendars for the things that are happening. And I'll probably post things as I find them here as well on digital twins. So so keep posted on that page.
So let me follow up on that, Grace, for just a second. Right, so this is something that we've certainly experienced here, is the breadth of what the definition of that actually is, right? And I think it becomes very challenging if every single conversation that has had about these sorts of things, can potentially devolve into a definitional problem, right? So I think, Reinhardt always talks about trying to be inclusive with respect to this, and I understand that, and certainly in a, ill-defined space, defining what it is we're actually talking about. But I think one of the things that I'm hoping for is that there is let's call it a reasoned evaluation of what the definitions actually can deliver, right? It's some contextualization of what, the capabilities are based on how you define them and that type of thing. And, that becomes a necessary starting point for any sort of conversation about these things, as you pointed out. But I think the other recognition that was intrinsic to what's come out of our particular group, and that you alluded to, is the idea that the inherent connection to the real world, that data connection that's part of the formal definition of an industrial digital twin, is in many circumstances insufficient. And therefore, the expectation that you can deliver a digital twin without the pre-existence of those sensors, that's kind of like a chicken or the egg problem. So I would strongly hope that there would be some sort of integrated offerings that combine the need for determining what sensors need to be there to answer what the requirements of the digital twin actually are, moving forward. This goes directly to the comment that was made in this particular presentation of hard problems require hard solutions, or hard problems are hard, complex problems require complex solutions. And I think, again, I'm just giving you my opinion. Sometimes people are looking for too much immediate gain, right? Part of the generation of that particular comment was Reinhardt's comment, interactions with an industry thing that had moved away from mechanistic modeling to AI, because AI is easier, right? You don't have to worry about a lot of the things that we have to worry about, but there's a whole set of things that you can't do with that. And I think a recognition that, there needs to be a sustained development effort to build the robust ecosystem to achieve the things that you actually want. That seems to not necessarily be reflected sometimes in what people ask for with respect to what the output of a particular project happens to be, or the requirement, quite frankly, for the quote unquote preliminary data to justify that particular endeavor. Because a lot of the things that we're talking about that you need to be able to do at this stage, it's a rhetorical argument in many cases that we try and ground in logic, right? And what the actual needs happen to be and what the capabilities actually are. But I don't know if that is a perspective that people who evaluate what we're proposing or what can be proposed take.
Yeah, I mean, I actually I'll probably post some slides or graphics that I've been presenting about digital twins. And I think that is the very first challenge, is to define what you want to predict with a digital twin. You may not need the digital twin. I mean, well, okay, first defining the digital twin.
Yeah, that's right.
Say is defining your physical system, defining your mechanistic framework, defining the real-time measures that you want to collect, integrating the models with the measures and simulating and predicting the real-time outcomes. Now, what would you want from that? What problem do you want to solve with this whole structure?
Right. And is it only a prediction problem? Right? Is it only prediction? Because industrial digital twins aren't only used to predict, they are used to inform policy. So there is an inherent, and this again is in my opinion, a problem with how many of these things are portrayed with an emphasis on prediction, which is fine. But as a clinician, it is not sufficient for me to know what's going to happen to a patient unless I can do something about it. And if you ask any clinician whether or not they are happy with the set of interventions available to treat the diseases that they treat, the answer is no. And we have this entire infrastructure of biomedical research that is aimed at developing new interventions, and not having that as an explicit target of what we are supposed to do with these objects, I think is very misguided.
Well, I'm going to jump in here. Grace is of course the elephant in the room here, but I'm going to comment because I think that there's perhaps less of a gap perhaps that there may seem to be here in terms of perspective. If we want to be able to control health states, whether that is human designed interventions or ultimately some kind of regulated intervention, which is automatic, a human out of the loop, closed loop medical regulation, the way an artificial pancreas works, or the way a cardiac pacemaker works. The first thing that we have to be able to do is predict. Prediction is a requirement to be able to do regulation. And
but
so
it's not sufficient. And I think that is the problem.
That's fine. And but I think that there are two issues here, one of which is what is the long-term goal, which is to improve therapy, whether that is through human in the loop, human out of the loop, or something totally different, some new kind of medicine to be dangerous and sound like somebody I won't mention. But I think that we could agree that prediction is a necessary step and data feeds are a necessary step. And so I think Grace's point that you have to ask the question, what can you do with the currently available data feeds? And what kinds of data feeds that are not possible now would be needed to go further to do prediction more effectively is a legitimate question. I think your point that you really want to develop all these things in parallel rather than as a bunch of separate, disconnected initiatives is also very important.
Well, I think so. My main point, right, which goes back to Reinhardt's conversation with that industry partner, is that the emphasis on prediction leads to methods that are not scalable to control, right? And this is exactly the problem that I'm talking about, because if you emphasize prediction, you can get methods that can do good prediction, but they provide no pathway forward towards control. And this is again exactly my point with respect to how far seeing forward you're going to have to be. Right. This is a problem that has plagued our particular domain in terms of modeling mechanistic cellular behaviors, right? Not physical models. I'm just talking about cellular behaviors. Is that you are always going to get better prediction with a data-centric model if you get enough data. But those do not provide you a path forward to evaluate what happens if you perturb those systems, unless you perturb them in the first place, in which case, what do you need the model for, right? So, but again, this is my own, cross to bear, or whatever, my own thing that I always argue about, which is exactly the foresight to recognize that to predict, while sufficient in the short term or necessary in the short term, is completely insufficient from a methodological standpoint to achieve the ultimate goal of what biomedical research would be, which is to take people who are going to get sick or are sick and make them better.
So I think that the point, and I'll turn it over to Reed just 1 second. I think the point that you've made though is again, I don't see these as incompatible. We could agree that prediction is a first step. We could lay out the harder problem, which is how do we do what I would call the inverse problem or the control problem, which is to say, we're at given state X, we want to design some intervention that will get us to desired state Y. And that's a harder problem because we have to solve essentially a limitless number of perturbation cases to go forward. And that's a very hard thing to do. And then the third step is, how do we deliver it? How do we design actuators that allow us to implement that strategy, which is even harder. And so we could set out a set of stage goals, which I think this group could very well do, to say, we're going to now assume that the world has data feeds of certain kinds and the ability to predict based on those data feeds, whether it's mechanistic or otherwise. We could lay out details about what still needs to be done there, which is a lot. And then we could ask the question, if we had that in our science fiction world, how would we go forward? What's needed? Because I think you're right that people are underestimating the difficulty of this problem, because control is much harder than forward prediction.
Well, I don't think they're underestimating it. They are accepting it and avoiding it.
Okay, so let's let Reed have
Anyway,
his
okay,
say.
sorry.
I'll just thanks everybody for the last 2 years. It's been a really great, I'm looking at another monitor. Sorry, let me put it up here. It's been a really great time. I've learned a lot from the NIH perspective. And I guess just to add to the conversation, I mean, from the NIAID front, I'm a big fan of digital twins. I think the concept is really exciting and try to promote it. I think when I talk to colleagues, they say, well, we do these models in the context of infectious disease, but we don't call them digital twins. And so I always find that notable because there's a ton of papers on it and folks are aware of it. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, but I guess I'm not an expert in this field. My one sentence would be, I think, as you're thinking about moving forward is, obviously there's a huge gap to get into making these things, employable and implementable in the clinic, for example. But getting back to where are we, what can be done today, and what are the limitations with what can be done today in clear terms that maybe informatics folks, modelers wouldn't necessarily resonate with. So I think that's kind of a like to keep in mind as you move forward on this, because I think it's really exciting. I think it is the future. You're going to have, I think sometimes when I talk to folks, they think about the concept of we're not predicting how far the plane's going to go. We want the model to understand the plane, how it fits together. And I think of a digital twin as like, maybe not, like what are the components that we need in that digital twin, just, at that level for the non-modelers. So anyways, I'll stop there, but I think that's kind of the feedback that I've gotten when I've talked to folks about these concepts.
Go ahead, Mike Mitchell.
Yeah, so it's good to see everyone. I've been out of the loop for a while, but was hoping to get back involved with this group. This was just a comment for this slide that we have here. I wanted to ask if maybe we should also consider inclusive immune digital twins. So this is something that came up when we were a part of the outreach and dissemination group. We never went forward with it, but we talked about really highlighting the fact that immune response is largely dictated by environmental stressors. And so one of the things we've been talking about here in my postdoc work as well is making inclusive model suites or inclusive digital twins that really account for, subgroups that maybe are at a higher level of environmental stress. And so that automatically puts them at a different risk state than those maybe more privileged or lucky to be in an environment with that. So I would like to, I think that might be a good goal or thing to keep in mind with these aims here.
Thank you. That's a good point. And I think it was in our early discussions and our early subgroups. And then I think that we perhaps were overwhelmed by the number of things to think about at the same time. And so it's worth, I think, appreciate you bringing that back as an important consideration. Other comments and suggestions? I think Reed's comment about identify what could we do today, which is not nothing. What's the difference between what I'd call a virtual tissue and a digital twin, and what components are needed to move forward? What's missing? These are important things. I think a lot of the roadmap issues are there. I know George reached out to a number of people in the working group for slides and comments on exactly these issues to prepare his talk to the National Academies next week. And so I know a number of people in the working group were polled to provide their ideas about this. So we'll see. It'd be interesting to see how that is integrated. George, of course, has his PINN approaches that are a nice hybridization of machine learning and mechanistic approach, which make him a very good person to discuss these issues. Other comments, suggestions, ideas? We have the steering committee tomorrow. We can discuss these things also in more detail.
I think it's also just to add to this conversation. I think it is important to yes, we absolutely need to maybe characterize and really describe what is possible today and what can be done with that, and also imagine what we would like it to look like if money was not an obstacle, for example. But I think what we have today in terms of the data, for example, there is enough data that I think a caricature or deformed digital twin of the immune system could be built. It'll probably not be very good, but I think it will better highlight what gaps in data we have, and also identify the things that may not be obvious today because we haven't been putting these data in such a comprehensive fashion. That will open up new opportunities for more specific opportunities for additional types of data measurements. And I feel like there is a need for a minimum viable product here that we can be talking about, what we all would sort of imagine in the end. I think that's important, but I think we need to get to work with what we have and build something that functions. Won't be perfect, but we can start iterating on that. William.
Yeah, here, we'll lower the hand so I don't have it in my face there. So in the beginnings of the draft paper that's going to be talking about this stuff, somebody mentioned the idea of the digital twin or model for the digital twin as being some kind of a codification of our knowledge about how the immune system works. And I think this is important. So Donald Knuth, computer scientist, wrote LaTeX, or tech actually, came up with the idea of literate programming and made the point that the audience for a computer program as written is humans, right? If the audience was really the machine, we'd be writing it in machine code. We wouldn't be writing it in some high-level programming language, right? So a little bit the same way here, where if we can write down, even as you put it, a caricature or a cartoon model of the immune system, clearly, so that it has all of the parts we expect it to have, and we can see them, this would do a lot, even just for understanding, right? I think it would be a very useful tool for understanding. I mean, maybe this is just my perspective because I know nothing about how the immune system works, and it's big and giant, and whenever I read anything about it, there's tons of stuff and I get overwhelmed. So I kind of think that if we could write a model that's understandable and sort of modular, we can see the parts and we can follow our nose through it and explore it, that would be, on its own, that would be super useful.
So William, I agree with you. I think that in some ways, what Tom is doing with his college students is this, right? And I know in my own experience that the mere process of model construction is an important, pedagogical tool, and is very, very useful and can gain you insights. Just the mere static representation of the knowledge map or the conceptual model that's going to be used. I think the part of, and this is a little bit out of scope for this conversation, but part of the challenge with respect to our underlying model specifications that we go into constructing a digital twin is epistemic uncertainty, perpetual epistemic uncertainty, combined with the necessary abstraction to have something that is comprehensible. So if you have an industrial digital twin and you create an abstraction of that, since those things are engineered objects, people accept that particular abstraction. But very often, and most of us who've interacted with biologists will see this, right? And we actually have the obverse problem with people who want too simple mathematical models, is that very often like, well, you left this out or you left that out. And I don't believe it because you left that out. This is an intractable type of issue. So hopefully this paper will go some way to determining whether or not, or how to determine whether a particular knowledge map is sufficient to explain the data that you happen to have, and what else is necessary to establish trustworthiness of the instantiation of.
We lost Gary for a second. I'm going to jump in with my usual hobby horse on that.
I liked what Gary was saying, though.
I'm going to jump in, though, to go further with that, which is there are two key missing pieces, which people don't talk about enough. Well, there are a bunch. How do you actually validate models when they're stochastic and you only have one replica, which is the individual, which is hard, which we could learn maybe from weather prediction. But the other thing is that you have to have digital twin, not only of the human and the human immune system, but of the measurements that you're taking, because you have to understand how those measurements are achieved and what they mean. And we have very little mathematics about how measurements, actually sensor technology works. And if you're ever going to go forward to do what Gary wants, which is deliver medicine, especially in my closed loop sci-fi vision, you have to have models of what interventions are possible. And we very often don't think about that. How do we model what we can do to a human being to control or change health state? We model the human health state, but the interventions are treated as externalities, but you can't do an arbitrary intervention. And we don't have good models of what those interventions are possible, what possible interventions they are. And if you want to do control theory and design control, we have to know how the system behaves, and we have to know what we can do to it. We have to have consistent mathematical ways of representing the interventions. And that's really an understudied problem. And it's a very hard one.
So that's one engineering step beyond what the first step in that is whether or not, from a conceptual basis, given a representation of a more comprehensive representation of all the interconnections, what the theoretical consequence of a particular perturbation actually are. And I think we actually have a set of perturbations that are candidates, and that comes from all our colleagues who do biological drug discovery. So targets for drugs have been identified. And to a certain degree, the disconnect between those modelers who only want to do models that can be sufficiently parameterized, and then those modelers who want to do models that are complex enough to actually answer the questions about the targets that biologists are interested in, there's actually a wide gulf there. And this issue of identifiability, et cetera, which is written into that draft for, the roadmap for the digital twins, is exactly what this problem is. But before we come to a solution of that problem, the problem needs to be acknowledged as something that needs to be solved. Right? I mean, this is the disconnect between the aggregate abstract models that seem to be very popular, that are parameterizable, because they don't have the sufficient granularity to answer the questions that the biologists are working on, which requires parsing lumped variables into their component parts.
I think this comes back to being very clear about what the purpose of the digital twin is.
Right,
What
I
is it
agree.
you want to predict and how you will be planning on applying it.
But it also goes to the intersection of this endeavor with the other things that Grace talked about, right? Because these things are not developed in vacuum. They are intended to help biologists who are looking at specific drug targets to determine whether or not this is a fruitful target to actually target, and placing it in what had originally been a systems biology context, but no longer means that anymore. And I think that the other component of this is from a theoretical hypothetical standpoint, as is done in high energy physics, right? The theory drives what the experiment should be, and to a certain extent, what the sets of perturbations or sensors or whatever you need to have to be able to control this particular system, in theory. And you say, listen, we have demonstrated that we need to be able to know X, Y, and Z about the state of this particular system at this particular interval in order to be able to control it. And if you don't, then you have too much uncertainty in the future prediction to be able to make a determination about whether this is going to work or not. Please, someone go out and develop that particular sensor, because we need it to solve this particular problem. Right, that is the kind of integrated role of how, digital twins aside, this mechanistic modeling is supposed to work.
Thank you, Gary. We have about 13 minutes left. Who else? What do you all think? We still have 20 or so people on the call.
I may call on somebody. So I see somebody in the room who's a student, who is interested, I think is doing an MD PhD, and who's joined us from time to time. And I don't know if you're actually there, but if you're a colleague, I'd love to get your take on things. You're the new generation. You're the person looking forward to this. And I think it's very important that we hear from people who are starting in this field. Gary and I are sort of fixed in our ways. Grace is at the summit of a successful career. How do you see the future? What would you like to see happen?
That's a great question, Dr. Glazier. I mean, the thing that I've been thinking about a lot in my first year of med school, I want to be a physician scientist, is some of the disconnect between what's like biologically relevant and what's clinically relevant. Because when we're thinking of, at least what I'm learning for all the clinical stuff, it's like, what are the symptoms, the macro symptoms, and based on that, what tests should you order? And then based on the results of the test, what's your diagnosis? And then based on what the literature says, what's the best treatment to use, at least first. So that got me actually, during this talk, thinking a lot more about how can we use the existing tools that physicians already have in order to build these models, especially thinking about the measurement issue. This is probably more specific than what you were thinking, but thinking about, well, if it's difficult to say measure the metabolites or other variables for the system you want to create a digital twin for, can we use, like, say, the results from existing tests we already do, like serum analytes, urine analytes, as like proxies for what we want to measure, or to somehow couple those values to what we actually want to measure? Because that, I think, could certainly make it easier from a clinical perspective if we want to imagine a physician like running this digital twin to figure out what's going on. So those were just some of the thoughts that I was having on this. I think regarding the point of using, say, an AI or a meta model instead of a mechanistic model, like, yes, that would get you results sooner, but I think you would have better trust in digital twins among patients and in the medical community if you were able to take a mechanistic approach and say, this is why we're modeling things this way, instead of just kind of throwing it into a neural network or something. Those are just a couple of my thoughts. Love to hear what anyone else have to say.
Thank you for being willing to jump in. I think we would all, the vast majority of us would agree very well. You were very eloquent, I think, in providing that perspective. I think that your comment is a good one, and I think this issue about what can we do with what we have. We've had some talks where people use what you could get now from real-time feeds, which is heart rate, blood pressure, oxygenation, body temperature, which are very coarse-grained surrogates. Maybe we can back out some of the fine-grained things, that the details may be hidden or aggregated in a way that can be at least partly inferred before we develop the super technologies for making the micro measurements. But I think one of the issues that comes up again and again, and Gary talked about talked from the bottom up about drug target design. And you've been talking from the top down, which is what you do and what you measure at the clinical level, is all of the levels of organization between the molecular control, if you're using drugs, and the outcome, which is what you want to have happen at the patient level. And the same drug given to the same patient at different times and in different doses can save a life or kill it. And so it's not that there are unique molecular solutions. We have to understand how to use them in time, in space, and those that make, even if we have a drug that we know well, in quotation marks, how to use it optimally still is a very hard problem. And so I think that, but I think your perspective about trying to put these things together and start from the clinical end, I think is very valuable. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are great comments, and they point to two more readily available exemplars that have been posed as effective digital twins. One is the artificial pancreas, right, which is able to use a standard laboratory value, and determine a controller for insulin based on that particular value. And the other area that is very robust and shows a lot of promise is a very sophisticated physical modeling of the cardiovascular system that is being done. Unfortunately, her name slips my mind, but out at Stanford. And for operative planning and intervention planning and that type of thing. So the thing that those systems share, which Dr. Glazier alluded to not being present in many drug developments, is a trustworthy mathematical formulation that is trustworthy enough, right? Is epistemically trustworthy enough for people to believe those particular models. And I think this is the central challenge that we have to bridge that clinically relevant divide.
Other comments or questions? We have some other younger, I guess the word younger is prejudicial, earlier career stage individuals in the room that we'd love to hear from.
The Marsden Lab, that's the name of the lady out there in California. Sorry.
And we'd also be happy to hear from people with different perspectives. I know you probably are tired of hearing me and Gary say the same things again and again. Anyone willing to speak up? We have 5 more minutes.
Sorry, I was trying to speak up, but I was muted as always. So for those, I guess I'm Hayden Fennell, a postdoc working with Dr. Glazier. I just wanted to quickly mention that I'm particularly interested in, I think it was William Waits who brought up the idea of using digital twins as educational tools for maybe filtering down the amount of information that's out there about the immune system, because I'm kind of in the same boat as William. My background's not in biology per se, particularly not in immune biology. So anytime I try to read something, it's very overwhelming. But the idea of having a model that you can look at maybe with modular levels of complexity, I think could be very useful, particularly in teaching this stuff as a method of filtering in or filtering out extraneous information, which is often easy to find, particularly in textbooks on this kind of stuff. So I guess I just wanted to add an extra note of interest in that as something to potentially look at over the next year.
Maybe something we can think about is proposing or sending out a call for subgroups related to the different challenges that we've been talking about related to the immune digital twin, because there is a lot to solve. There is a lot to even figure out what needs to be solved. And I think there is a lot of diverse expertise in the working group. We have over 200 members, and so might be interesting to see if it can be sort of broken down into more manageable topics.
Veronica, did you want to speak up?
Me?
I saw you unmuted, so I thought I'd love to hear your opinion in any case, even if you weren't planning on saying it.
I really like what Gary said about that prediction is not enough, that we need to offer interventions. And this, for me, it sounds like a next step, because before people were saying that for modeling, fitting the data is not enough, you need to offer testable predictions. But now predictions is not enough, you need to offer interventions, right? It's like we're progressing to, what I want to say is that if you have even a very rough but mechanistic model, first of all, a very rough model with less parameters, if they capture the essence of the event, they will be more robust and more predictable. And also, if you have the mechanistic model, that means that you kind of know the mechanism. And if you know the mechanism, then you can adjust, right? That means that mechanistic models, they immediately give you lots of ideas for intervention. So that would be my kind of point. But I really like this kind of successive going from fitting to prediction and then to intervention. And as I've already started to talk, I would like to thank James for his dedication to this program, for putting lots of his time and energy to establish all of these successful collaborations that we all benefit during these 2 years. So that's.
Okay, well, thank you.
Everybody agree with me on this.
Yeah, I wanted to echo that too, James, Reinhardt, and Tom. And setting up this working group was definitely, and Jim, all your work with the wiki is definitely a feat and an amazing success. And all the things that you listed in your presentation was just fantastic. So I wanted to ask if you and Tom would want to present to the MSM steering committee about the progress of your working group and where you might want to evolve within the MSM consortium overall. Initially, you had said that you fit in all the task forces and you could apply to, you can match with any of the working groups, and so if you wanted to have some more pairings with other working groups or how we can better serve you to facilitate this working group effort, just let me know.
we'd be happy to do a presentation.
Great.
Any last comments? We're at our time limit. I think this has been a great discussion. I think this Veronica's comment about bootstrapping and refinement, that once you have some digital twin that makes some prediction, improvement is rapid. And that was something we heard early on from the GE people, that getting that very first digital twin, even if it wasn't very good, was the critical step. As soon as you had it, just running it improved it enormously, and you learned an enormous amount. And I think that comes back to Gary's slogan, that just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Getting started is the hard part. Once you have it, you could improve it. And I think defining those minimal criteria for what would lead to a digital twin and getting it going is really, it's not an easy task, even the minimal one. But once you could do that, the progress will be very rapid, much more rapid than we can imagine. So with that, thank you, Grace, and thank you, everybody. We can continue the conversation tomorrow on the steering committee. I hope I'll see many of you there. And we appreciate everybody's engagement and patience over the past 2 years.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Tom and James and Reinhardt after he's on.
Yeah, thank you.